Students, today we are going to learn the second type of ratio called solvency ratio. Solvency ratio, also known as long-term solvency ratio. Solvency ratio measures the firm's ability to repay the long-term debt. The solvency ratio must be expressed in form of proportion. It is a balance sheet ratio. Yes, in this solvency ratio, there are three types of ratio we have. 1. Debt equity ratio. 2. Proprietary ratio. 3. Capital gearing ratio. First, we are going to learn about debt equity ratio. The formula for debt equity ratio is long-term debt divided by shareholder fund. In long-term debt, we have to take long-term borrowing such as debenture, bank loan. Then in shareholder fund, we have to take preference share capital, equity share capital, reserves and surplus. Then, second ratio is that proprietary ratio. Proprietary means a shareholder. So for this, the formula is shareholder fund divided by total assets. What are all the components of shareholder fund? As we know, preference share capital, equity share capital and reserves and surplus. Then total assets. Total assets means we'll take all the assets, fixed assets and current asset. Then last one, capital gearing ratio. Its formula is fixed interest and fixed dividend bearing securities divided by equity shareholder fund. First we should know about fixed dividend and fixed interest bearing securities, namely preference share capital, bank loan and loan. Then equity shareholder fund components we have to learn. Already we learned shareholder fund. In shareholder fund, we know preference share capital, equity share capital and reserves and surplus are included. But in equity shareholder fund, we should exclude preference share capital. In that we will include equity share capital and reserves and surplus. Now look at the board. We are learning second type of ratio, solvency ratio. It is also called a long-term solvency ratio. It must be expressed in form of proportion. This ratio measures the firm's ability to repay the long-term debt. It must be expressed in form of proportion. It is a balance sheet ratio because we are using the components of balance sheet. Okay, first one, debt equity ratio. Formula long-term debt divided by shareholder fund. Long-term debt means long-term borrowing. What are all long-term borrowing? Debenture, bank loan. It is also called non-current liability. It is also called non-current liabilities. It is also called non-current liabilities. Then shareholder fund, preference share capital, equity share capital, reserves and surplus. Then proprietary ratio. Its formula shareholders fund divided by total assets. Shareholder fund we know preference share capital, equity share capital and reserves and surplus. For total assets we will take all the assets, which means fixed asset and current asset. Total asset means fixed asset plus current asset. Then capital gearing ratio formula fixed interest and fixed dividend bearing security divided by equity shareholder fund. Fixed interest and fixed dividend bearing securities are debenture, bank loan and preference share capital. For preference share capital we will pay fixed rate of dividend. For debenture, bank loan we will pay fixed rate of interest. So here fixed percentage of dividend for preference share capital, for debenture, bank loan will pay fixed rate of interest. Then we should learn about the components of equity shareholder fund. Already we learned shareholder fund. In shareholder fund the components are preference share capital, equity share capital, reserves and surplus. If we exclude preference share capital, the remaining two items are considered to be the equity shareholder fund. Students will learn one problem in relation to these ratios. Students, let me see one problem in relation to the solvency ratio. Yes, look at the board. This question I have taken from Tamil Nadu government 12th standard accountancy textbook. Yes, look at the problem. From the following balance sheet of Arunan Limited as on 31st March 2019, calculate debt equity ratio. So first ratio, we are going to calculate debt equity ratio. Debt equity ratio, first one. Debt equity ratio. Formula is, we know, long-term debt divided by shareholder fund. Long-term debt divided by shareholders fund. First we have to find long-term debt. So long-term debt consisting of non-current liability, long-term borrowing, which are debenture, bank loan. So we have to search on the liability side. So here non-current liabilities are given. Long-term borrowing 9% debenture 4 lakh. So we'll take only debenture. So 9% debenture. 9% debenture rupees 4 lakh. So only one item given. Then we have to take shareholders fund. Shareholder fund consisting of 3 items: preference share capital, equity share capital, and reserves and surplus. So shareholder fund, namely equity share capital, preference share capital, and reserves and surplus. Equity share capital, preference share capital, and reserves and surplus. Equity share capital value 1,50,000. Preference share capital value 2 lakh. Reserves and surplus value 1,50,000. So 3 lakh, 3 lakh, 5 lakh. Okay. Now we are going to calculate debt equity ratio. What is the formula? Long-term debt value 4 lakh. Shareholder fund value 5 lakh. So divide, we'll get 0.8:1. It should be expressed in form of proportion. So ratio number 1 is over. Then second ratio, we are going to learn proprietary ratio. Proprietary ratio. For that, formula is shareholder fund, shareholders funds divided by total assets. Shareholder fund divided by total assets. Already we ascertained shareholder fund. Its value 5 lakh. Total assets, we know the asset side will take total assets, its value 10 lakh. So our answer is 0.5:1. Proprietary ratio. Then the third ratio, capital gearing ratio. Capital gearing ratio. We know formula: fixed interest and fixed dividend. Dividend bearing securities. Bearing securities divided by equity shareholder fund divided by equity shareholders funds. First, we have to take the fixed interest and fixed dividend bearing securities. What are all fixed interest and fixed dividend securities? Preference share capital, debenture, bank loan. Here we will take preference share capital and debenture. So 8% preference share capital, because for preference share capital we will pay fixed rate of dividend value 2 lakh. And we will take 9% debenture. 9% debenture, its value 4 lakh. So our fixed dividend and fixed interest bearing securities value 6 lakh. Then the denominator is equity shareholder fund. Equity shareholder fund. As usual, like shareholder fund, in shareholder fund there are 3 items: preference share capital, equity share capital, reserves and surplus. But in equity shareholder fund we have to exclude preference share capital. Yes, now we'll take equity share capital. Equity share capital value 1,50,000. Then reserves and surplus. Reserves and surplus rupees 1,50,000. Total 3 lakh. So fixed interest and fixed dividend bearing securities value 6 lakh. Equity shareholder fund 3 lakh. So our answer is 2:1. Students, we completed problem in relation to the solvency ratio. In next class we will solve different problem. Till then, bye and thank you.